orcs. Now, not to worry, this episode isn't going to be just another member of the chorus talking about how if all orcs in a game are blindly evil, that it's racist. Instead, we want to discuss how that particular choice is simply bad game design.
Man, hard to believe that train wreck of a video was about half a decade old now. Feeling the Reaper on your shoulder, guys? Oh, yeah. New look, too. So, with the latest season of Frieren coming up, me getting my expectations blown out of the water, I was reminded of a conversation that just happened over a year ago talking about the demons in the manga and anime, and the whole topic of evil races, or species if you prefer, was brought to the table. And I figured it'd be an interesting topic to delve into, because it's a bit of a writing trope and I love diving into them. Here's a spoiler warning for the series we'll be talking about in this video. Now bear with me on this, we're about to get a little controversial because you've been a long-time viewer on my channel, you know I've talked about tropes here and there. They are, after all, technically the building blocks when it comes to writing stories. Evil races or species are a trope in and of themselves that are divided into several other smaller tropes. But for the sake of this video and your sanity, we'll all be on the same page when we talk about this trope. We are effectively referring to the common concept in sci-fi and fantasy genre that an entire race of bad guys exists. It's an extremely old trope, as there are several myths and folktales that talk about creatures that are always portrayed as evil in nature. And it's something that we see in stuff like D&D, or used to until it got scrubbed in 2024, but I digress. I'll be honest, with this kind of trope, I'm on the fence with it. On the one hand, I find it to be a bit of a lazy element to declare one entire species is by the default to be evil. Speaking of D&D, I've never been a fan of when you choose a monster race to be a player character, you are hard set to a certain alignment. I just want to play my lizard folk mechanic with the automail arm and be a good boy. On the other hand, the trope is heavily dependent on what the medium and story is trying to accomplish. If you look at a ton of old school video games like, say, Metroid, a lot of the enemies you fight in the games rarely have good counterparts and are constantly trying to kill you on sight. Sticking with Metroid, the namesake of the entire series, creatures are effectively this. They're alien creatures that are energy-leeching predators who are initially created to combat another dangerous life form called the X-Parasite, which we'll talk about later, but they aren't really all that picky on what they attack. In that regard, you can consider them to be like an evil race. But here's where I think it becomes interesting. It's more or less the outliers that make this trope a bit more fascinating to talk about. What do I mean by that? It's when you pull back the surface level analysis and generalization to really dive into the more individual aspects that I find to be good. I'll get more into that in this video, but if you want an example right now, let's get back to the Metroids real quick. For the purposes of a game, they're fine as enemies. You're not really supposed to think about what you're doing because these are evil monsters that are effectively out to destroy the futuristic society of the games. So you try to get rid of them as fast as you can because that's the right thing to do. Either that or you really want to see Samus in a skimpy outfit. Can't really blame anyone for that, them some great looking pixels. But at one point, Samus effectively adopts a baby Metroid. It doesn't attack her, it's actually kind and harmless to her. It's a baby! And at one point it even saves Samus from another Metroid, Mother Brain. Only to be killed. And it's stuff like that I think can be used to open the doors on the more nuances with evil races in fiction, to open up the blinders and really get people thinking. Finding outliers in these sorts of things can be interesting footnotes that can really flesh out an evil race, quote unquote, but that depends on a few factors. Are you going for simple writing or nuanced writing? You can certainly dislike the trope all you want. You can find issues with it and how it can be harmful, but we really need to consider something. This is all fiction.
She's not real!
We can get into the roundabout argument of how much fiction can affect reality. I think it more or less stems down to the individual though. But let's really talk about some examples and really dive into them so that we can talk and have an idea on what I'm referring to. When you have to consider evil races for a story, their origin and nature are elements that need to be brought up. Like with the Metroid example I gave, they are bioweapons used to combat another evil race, the X-Parasites. The problem was that the Metroids were so good that it thought all the X-Parasites were gone and the Metroids became the biggest universal issue.
What happens when we're overrun by lizards?
No problem. We simply unleash wave after wave of Chinese needle snakes. They'll wipe out the lizards.
But aren't the snakes even worse?
And when the Metroids were practically gone, the X-Parasites came back and showed that they were a lot more dangerous than the X. If you have any idea what the thing from another world could do, infect a living creature, take it over, and mutate it to suit its needs, yeah, imagine that on a much wider scale. These things can reproduce quickly, they can't effectively be killed, except by a Metroid touch or some stuff that would be overkill like blowing up a space station or planet, and they are intelligent. They don't even need to absorb living tissue to assimilate creatures. They can do that to dead bodies. They gain the memories and anything else that the body has, and even if that copied form is destroyed, the X-Parasite can escape and reform that copy with time. They also can seem to retain a host's personality too. It's effectively the ultimate life form, only without the edge and guns, most of the time. And these things are smart. Take for example when you first encounter the X-Parasites in Metroid Fusion. The X will just fly right into Samus, unaware that she has Metroid DNA in her now, and they will just be absorbed via touch. Because again, the X just needs to touch you to infect you, but eventually they start to flee from Samus. They're also smart creatures that are able to determine bigger threats. Like again how in Fusion you have the SAS, an X-Parasite that is a doppelganger of Samus actively attacking Metroids over you because, well, a single touch from a Metroid can kill an X-Parasite. The only thing that these X-Parasites, despite their intelligence, is that they have an inherent desire to consume everything, even though we demonstrate to see them planning and going against their instincts to solve problems. But there's no way to coexist with these creatures. Even after birth, the X-Parasite begins its hunt. Reminder, the Metroids were created to act as a natural predator to the X-Parasites. Now, as to how I see the X-Parasites in this way, I think that since they're pretty much a parasitic, intelligent life form, it's easy to see them as an evil race. Sure, from a writing perspective, you're not going to get a deep villain like, say,
the weak will be purged, and the strongest will thrive, free to live as they see fit. They'll make America great again!
What the hell are you talking about?
But I see the X-Parasites to be a more force of nature type of antagonist. They're only following their nature. Well, most of the time. Because in Metroid Dread, we do have an outlier. At the end of the game, when Samus is effectively becoming a full-on Metroid, she's unable to use her ship to escape the exploding planet because if she did, she'd just drain the ship of its power. But then an X-Parasite that possessed a character named Quiet Robe who was killed earlier in the game, shows up, turns into its parasite form, and sacrifices itself to turn Samus back to normal so she can escape. And this raises questions. Was this the X-Parasite itself, or was it the personality of Quiet Robe that did this? Either way, it brings up some questions about the X-Parasites as an evil race because this act of selfishness goes against everything the X-Parasite showed up to now. Since we're on the topic of intelligent evil races, you think this is where we talk about the demons from Frieren, but I want to save that for a different section, because now I want to talk about Kamen Rider Gav.
Gav senpai. Mata.
Look, I've talked about this show a number of times, and I honestly think it's probably one of the best tokusatsu shows in general with a few stumbles here and there, but it's a fun romp either way. And recently, Gav's movie was actually subbed and brought up an interesting example to this subject. So, meet the Muters. These are a separate alien race of humanoid-like creatures that are based on Streptococcus mutans, which is essentially tooth decay. Considering that the whole series is based around snacks, I'd say that's an apt design choice for a bad guy. You essentially have this.
We make holes in teeth! We make holes in teeth!
Hell, the king of the muters, Caries, has two rider forms that are based on two levels of tooth decay severity. Now, I'm bringing this up because we would learn real quick that the muters, they have the ability and natural urge to use said ability.
人工力は世界を滅ぼしかねないように好きな世界を滅ぼすだけだここのようにな
For those who don't speak Japanese and are only using this video as background noise while drawing or writing, the muters have the ability to decay everything, living or artificial, and can even decay worlds to their destruction if they desire. And they find this to be fun. Now, we only get 2 examples of sentient muters, Kari's and his lackey Clark, along with some nameless foot soldiers, but we're shown some depraved actions by this group that are going around decaying entire worlds for no reason other than they can. One would be cloning Granutes, raising 200 subjects, and then harvesting them for their organs that could be used to transform Caris into his Kamen Rider form. And they show they're willing to do this in the most gruesome of ways. Since this is a movie-exclusive race in a Japanese tokusatsu show, we don't really get to see if there are any good muters, or if any of them are willing to go against their inner nature.
どうするっておとなしく自分の世界に戻るか
蝕み滅ぼすのは俺たちの本能だ誰にも止められはしねえ
But in a sense, that isn't necessarily needed. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, much like the X-Parasites, the muters' cruelty is more or less to showcase the inhumanity of the villains, their abilities and destructive nature that they hold. In a sense, it's more or less a kill or be killed situation, where these things will just kill you because they've got this nature to them. And that's the purpose for them. Much like how there are enemies in a video game or a one-time villain in a story, I don't think there's anything wrong with having an evil race, quote-unquote, in that regard. You're not really meant to think about the complexities akin to the plot. Not that it is impossible or even pushed away to think about these kinds of things. Hell, Kamen Rider Gav itself played with this in its actual series. I made an entire few videos about how a character at one point had negative experiences with the alien race, the Granutes, and he grew to understand that even the Granutes who kidnap humans were victims too because they were junkies that were hooked onto this stuff. Evil races are dependent on what piece of media needs them for, and you can say they're boring if you want on a certain level, but to me that's more of a background element and not really the focus of the story. Cause hey, with stuff like Kamen Rider Gav, I'm more for seeing the hero take down the bad guy in an amazing fashion, and there's nothing wrong with it. The murkiness comes when you want to draw more attention to the evil races, and that's when the discussion comes into play. Much like stuff like Tim Burton's Mars Attacks, these creatures aren't really used to make you think about the complexities of good or evil. They're mostly used for the purposes of entertainment, or in the case of The Martians, a spoof of alien films. Cause you're not really looking towards Metroid for these complexities, you're here to fight alien monsters. In Kamen Rider, while they can have complexities and have them, they're ultimately stories of heroes saving the day and preventing people from being dissolved or killed. But stuff like Mars Attacks, it's more for the purposes of fun and entertainment, even if some people consider it schlock. I mean, what else do you call when the way to kill aliens is with music? So you can certainly dislike the concept, but we can't just ignore that sometimes this is just for the purposes of entertaining and nothing more. You're not supposed to think about it too deeply, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you can make it more nuanced. But that isn't to say you can't take these sorts of things a step further. What about races that are artificially created or effectively evil? I say in quotes, due to their environment and circumstances. I touched on this with the Metroids, but they were created to combat a greater evil, and once that greater evil was thought to be dead, the Metroids basically went out of control. But they weren't even totally evil per se. They were wild animals that basically after birth could be just as innocent creatures. I think for this topic, I want to branch into something a little different, like Final Fantasy IX. Out of all the Final Fantasy games, especially the more classic old school ones, I feel like FF9 has kind of been left on the wayside to some degree. It has that classic fantasy feel to it, and all the while having a charm that new school RPGs just don't scratch that same itch. And it also offers a fun tale with some good brain scratchers here and there. I think later this year I really want to sit down and discuss this game, but for the purposes of this video, I want to talk about a race of people that were effectively created to be used as tools for evil, and that would be the Black Mages. If you're familiar with the series, typically Black Mages in Final Fantasy are a class, not a race. Anywho, early in the game we're introduced to how the Black Mages are created. You see, one of the continents in the world of Final Fantasy IX is covered in a mist that produces monsters in it, and a lot of technology that were introduced early into the game uses said mist to operate, stuff like airships. Early on we see that it creates a machine that makes eggs, so it's safe to assume that these eggs are made from the mist, and inside these eggs are the Black Mages. So yeah, they're artificial life forms, and later in the game we see that they're used as weapons, and at some point we do have to fight against them. While they're like this, they don't really have a will of their own, and are just effectively tools of war. Of course, there are a few wrinkles here and there with them just being an evil race. The first is that one of our first main party members, and one of the characters we get to play early on in the game, Vivi, is a Black Mage himself. He's got a consciousness, he's a nice kid who can shoot fire out of his hands, but he's also a Black Mage. We learned that he was a prototype for the mages, so it's entirely possible that these guys can be given free will and choose to do things. And the other wrinkle is, well, they can develop a consciousness. There's an entire Black Mage village where these cold-hearted magic soldiers can not only speak, but also have developed personalities, even taking care of those of them who have stopped moving. So this has a few implications that the players can really think about. Is this a flaw in their design where they develop a consciousness, or are they having their wills and such being suppressed by the process? Because we get examples of customized Black Mages, the Black Waltz, that are capable of speech and cognitive thought. Hell, that last one is able to pilot an airship.
Hey, it's time to make some crazy money. Are you ready? Here we go! Yeah.
And we're also shown that the Black Mages that we encounter super early on in the game, even before we see them used as weapons, are willing to protect Vivi from the third Black Waltz, only for them to be killed. So this already raises a few interesting thoughts about this artificially created race of Black Mages, and how they're used as tools for war. Though I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact these guys don't have a long lifespan. We learn in the Black Mage village that they have only at most 1 year of life. It's a cold fact that comes from the realization that eventually, even the character we've been with for most of the game, Vivi, will also stop moving one day. And I think this is something that is necessary if you want to really dive into a more nuanced outlook when it comes to evil races. Because from one perspective, the Black Mages were effectively made as tools who eventually stopped working. Whether it's a design choice or a flaw, it's never really stated in the game. Though I won't get too detailed into this, what's also interesting is that the Black Mages also have a bit of a parallel for another important character in the game, who is also a part of an artificial race that is used for the purpose of a higher being. Which I think brings into question this: should we consider a race that is constructed and controlled by a singular being to be evil if that being is itself malicious? In the case of the Black Mages, we don't know if they have awareness when they're being used as tools in war. But that's fine, that's an artificial race. What about something like the Saiyans from Dragon Ball Z? When we're first introduced to the Saiyans, with the exception of the main character Goku, they're described to be a race that are fighting, living violent lives where they could conquer planets and sell them off. Hell, they would even send their young to planets to conquer them. Initially. We get plenty of examples of Saiyans and their cruelty. I mean, just look at Vegeta in one of his earlier appearances.
Problem. We can be together forever. There's nothing like a little fireworks when you say good.
Aside from some reason being a brunette, which we all know is the most telling sign of being an evil person, he just casually wipes out an entire planet of bug people like it was nothing. Now, obviously there's a big counter to the Saiyans, and that's...
Hey, it's me, Goku!
Well, obviously, yeah. To me, back in the day, the Saiyans were an interesting case study. A race of warmongers and planet brokers, which we later learned were under the rule of Frieza. Their planet and race being drafted into the Frieza army, who then blew up their planet.
Magnificent! Oh my, look at the display! Zarbon, Dodoria, are you seeing these brilliant fireworks?
I think Raditz put it best.
You see, we Saiyans are sort of like planet brokers. We scour space for planets that will bring a high price on the galactic market. Once we find them, we send our warriors there to purge them of any life and make them ready for sale. It's a very, very profitable business, and we take great pride at being efficient in our work.
But Goku, after hitting his head on a rock when he was a kid, lost those more malicious traits. And if we look towards Vegeta himself, we can see he did get a lot of development. First, having his hair turn black, then eventually becoming a partial ally on Namek, and finally donning the manliest shirt of all time.
Why do you keep looking over here? Haven't you ever seen a pink shirt before?
And I think it's an interesting idea to see how these two Saiyans are able to no longer be a cut of the cloth of the Saiyan race, showing that it wasn't exactly that the race itself was evil, but more like how the upbringing and culture of the Saiyans was how these kinds of people were being created. How the environment that people grow up in is a key factor in how they develop it, and even how that's not impossible for someone who effectively redeemed themselves. Vegeta being a prime example of when he was willing to sacrifice himself to save his family, and even the one man who he had a hatred and rivalry with for years, even knowing that he himself knew what would happen.
You, on the other hand, have spent your life in pursuit of your own selfish desires. You've caused too much pain. When you die, you will not receive the same reward. Oh well. So be it.
It's not the greatest writing of all time, and it's certainly got some rust on its joints, but to be frank, I thought it was a good message that you're not your initial environment, and you can change for the better, or something like that. And in recent years, especially with stuff like Super, we've been given a bit more insight and some slight retconning when it comes to the Saiyans. Like apparently Vegeta has a brother named Tarble, who survived because he was off-planet. And in the Super era, we've seen more of the Saiyan culture, and how there's more than just warmongering going on. Even though Goku wasn't sent off to conquer a planet, but we had a more Superman-esque origin point here, where as a young kid, Goku was sent off to save him from the destruction that Frieza was about to inflict.
It's not like a Saiyan man to worry about his children. So what's gotten into you?
I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm constantly fighting, destroying, and I'd actually like to save something for once.
To be frank, I don't think this is necessarily bad. We get a bit more fleshed out culture of the Saiyans, and while they're still portrayed to be warmongering, there's a bit more to them. In addition, they're still being used as tools for Frieza, only to outlive their usefulness when he gains the fear of the Super Saiyan that will one day kill him. Stuff like this is fascinating to me, and it's why even though I've been super critical of the series and how it goes, it's why How the Boss caught my attention in the first place. You've got literal demons who clearly have their own culture and such, willing to kill and maim anyone, even going to Earth to get a buck, but they have a more human side to them. It's clear there's a lot of stuff that we as humans would consider evil, uncouth, and of course immoral that is acceptable among the demon kind in hell. Well, some of it anyway. But we still see that the demons have emotions, and dare I even say souls of their own, that make me believe that the more crass natures are a result of the cultures and environments they grew up in rather than an innate nature. And it's stuff that we're an evil race that can make you think in terms of writing. What exactly is evil? Can you really apply that term to a full group of people? And I'm talking about this in a fictional sense, okay? It's questions like these and many more that make fiction a wonderful thing, because once again,
she's not real!
and as such, we can explore these topics in a safe manner. Now we finally get to the big ones, Frieren and Devil May Cry. With a little JoJo peppered here and there. Around the end of 2024 and near the beginning of 2025, there were two pieces of media that cropped up that really got a lot of people thinking about this topic, albeit there being a few videos coming out. Obviously, I'm not here to respond to anyone about that, but it was the Demons in Frieren and Netflix's Devil May Cry series, which made me cry. I want to start with the latter first, because I've been on a DMC kick as of late. Hoping to get part 2 of my review on DMC 3 out soon, and blah blah blah.
What the hell is this?
Honestly, we're talking about the demons, the usual main antagonists in the games, and the ones you and Dante get to style on. You're not really meant to feel anything for the demons in the games. The only ones you're really supposed to care about are the characters who have half demon blood in them, like Dante, Virgil, and Nero. But it's not like the series hasn't shown that there are good demons, Trish being a prime example of that.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
A character who initially was created to lure Dante into the main antagonist of the series' trap, Mundus, and was willing to backstab him immediately, but eventually joined up with Dante and reformed to be good. And part of the whole aspect of Devil May Cry's story from beginning to end is to highlight the inherent good of humanity.
How can there be such a difference between us?
You surrendered your humanity. It's that simple.
But you are not human! So why am I inferior?
You assume humans are weak. Okay, yeah, their bodies lack the physical ability of a demon. But humans possess something that demons don't.
And one thing to note is that for a good portion of the antagonists in the series, the Order of the Sword, Arkham, Virgil, Arius...
My dream! My life! I was going to be the king of this world!
The reason that they are the bad guys is because they forfeit their humanity for the sake of demonic power, throwing away the good parts of themselves for great power. And it's not like the series makes humans out to be an all-good factor.
Humans. They are but stubborn and foolish. It takes a journey to hell for them to accept and praise their god.
But it's clear that the human side of things show that while humanity is capable of terrible things, it's also capable of great things too. And that's why it's utterly baffling to me that Netflix DMC took the route of humans bad, demons good.
Hell, as you call it, has always been the true heart of human religion. You can curb the worst of your savageries only through collective fear and hatred of another world.
Now, I've made about 2 videos last year going in depth why I think that depicting the demons as refugees and leaning into the entire trope of humans being bad is running counter to the entirety of DMC franchise's messaging, and it took me about a good hour how to explain that, along with the character who felicitated that, the White Rabbit.
You're the White Rabbit.
Yeah, you I am absolutely the White Rabbit.
And hey, if you enjoy the Netflix adaptation, more power to you. There are positives to it, but to me, I found it to be a very cliched and honestly not really understand the core of Devil May Cry. Because for all intents and purposes, you're effectively taking one lone factor, Sparta, the Dark Knight, the demon who was willing to go against all of demonkind in their own nature to save humanity and effectively do this.
He was a demon knight, whatever that means. Big bad warrior, blah blah blah. Served as the right hand of Mundus, the demon's king, 2,000 years ago when our world was still connected to their shithole.
The problem with demons in the Netflix show is that it effectively devalues the core concept in the name of Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry, the fact a demon could develop emotions and become human, is a part of what makes the series great. And every game features a demon that goes through that journey of becoming more human. Trish, Lucia, Dante himself, Nero, and Virgil. And when you make it like there's billions of good guy demons, it defeats the entire purpose of Devil May Cry.
Are you crying?
It's only the rain.
The rain already stopped.
The devils never cry.
I see. Maybe somewhere out there even a devil may cry when he loses a loved one. Don't you think?
Maybe.
A devil shedding tears signifies that they've gained humanity. It's supposed to be a significant event in the series, but when it's shown to be a much more common element, then that weight loses its significance. Even more so with Sparta. He wasn't the only good demon. He was the first demon to develop human emotions. That's why it was a big deal. He was empowered by justice! I think what also adds to this that any demon that isn't a direct reference to the games in the show is that they make them look a lot less monstrous. If you look towards Sparta's game designs, he's got this giant insectoid look to his true form. Hell, he kinda looks like something you find in a Kamen Rider or Tokusatsu show, the leader of a group of old school monsters, and that's because that's effectively what he was. But by making the demons lose the grotesque edge they had in the games, it devalues the aspect of good demons. Because if you know anything in the games, you know that the demons ain't the most pleasant things to look at. Well, most of them anyway.
Welcome, sir. Is this your first time here?
Yeah, it is.
But I think what I find to be very bad is that this is used to make a hackneyed political commentary and ignores the point of Devil May Cry. But hey, have some Green Day music as we have the American government conquer the demon world. You can certainly like what Netflix show does, but to me it completely flies in the face of what the games have done, and even in the reboot. There's nothing wrong with showcasing that a supposedly evil race isn't what it seems, but when it undercuts the series' core theme for the sake of political messaging...
Or of it.
Yep.
Right? So, and I didn't know that there was a Devil May Cry 5 coming out.
You didn't know?
No.
Wow.
I got actually unhappy.
Let's start the party!
That's when I have my own issues with it. Not helped by people who basically talk down for you for expressing that dislike. Well, that was about 3 pages worth of a rant. Looking forward to Season 2, I suppose.
I hoped it would be you, little brother.
Now, let's talk about the demons in Frieren. Though to point out, Frieren is an ongoing story, so I would say there are still things that could be brought up, so I'm just going off the material that we have available. And here's a curveball. I won't even really say the demons in Frieren are necessarily evil, at least in regard to a literary stance. I know what you're typing. Demons have been killing humans, lying to them in order to deceive them, and even in later parts of the manga, we get an example of a demon who's trying to understand human emotions, even swearing allegiance to a human lord. And how'd that end up? Alright, Mach turned a city and its inhabitants into pure gold!
Look, El Dorado, the city of gold.
Now, all of that sounds evil, right? I'm not going to disagree with that. But here's where the nuance comes into play, as well as the writing. You see, when you look at antagonists, they're supposed to have a bit of a mirror effect going on, or at least the best kind of antagonists do. They're supposed to have a dark reflection of the protagonist or the morals that you're supposed to learn from the story. Effectively, an antagonist is supposed to be a failure of the lessons that a story is teaching, a warning of sorts. The main story beat of Frieren is that she's an emotionally lacking elf that lives for a long time and gets stuck in mimics. We're shown in the series that she had a bit of a habit of not bonding with others. After all, most other people aren't going to live as long as she will, and they will eventually fade away into the dust. So Frieren does what she can. She pursues spells and other things that pique her interest. She has a bit of an obsession with that, and the story does what it does. It has Frieren travel with the hero Himmel, who effectively put a crack in that rigid armor that Frieren has, also helped by another friend who's on his deathbed asking her to become a mentor for a young mage. We're shown that another elf, Ciri, questions what is even the point of teaching humans magic, especially since they have such short lifespans and the effort wouldn't be worth anything. And then when we come to the demons in Frieren tend to focus on power. They will actively look down on those who have lesser magical skills, and will spit on the fact that some creatures will hide their magical abilities. One demon, Hora, couldn't have fathomed why someone would hide their true power instead of flaunting it to lord over others, while a demon who created a powerful killing magic, Zoltrak, was unable to understand how the human race would be willing to cooperate with each other to figure out how to incorporate his magic and counter it. Cooperation was foreign to him, and the key element in this is that it's because of bonds, or a lack of them. One of the biggest elements in Frieren is her coming to value the bonds that she has with others, even if they are just fleeting moments. And the demons showcase that despite the power and intelligence, all of that is effectively useless. It's basically showing what effectively Frieren could have ended up as, a cold internal collector of power who hides her strength not out of wisdom but arrogance, spinning on short-lived bonds like Ciri does with human mages. Demons lie, they kill, and even try emotions, and it blows up into a city of gold. They're not evil by choice, they're wired wrong, evolution's middle finger to empathy, and demons act as a perfect foil for Frieren's journey, just like the demons are foils for Dante's half-human swagger. At least until Netflix says, "Nah, humans suck, bring down the demon world wall, who cares if all humans die cause of it?" And that's the rut. We can discuss the whole thing about, are demons really evil, or are they just going off of their nature? But when we look at stuff from a literary angle, we can see there's a purpose for why the demons are the way they are. Now, you can obviously still dislike how the trope handles this stuff. You can still believe that even if there's a narrative reason for why the demons in DMC or Frieren are there, that's not a good trope. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Personally, I don't really like how some fictional races are handled, especially when there's obviously more nuanced examples out there. Take the vampires in JoJo. Though they are a lot more prominent out in Part 2, used as not only fodder and soldiers for the Pillarmen, we have a pretty blatant example of how they can be a lot more nuanced, even if they are evil, and that's Dio. Yeah, Dio cast away his humanity, and we certainly get to see the malice that he exudes afterwards. We see that he's evil. Obviously, he's ambitious, manipulative, charismatic, and a monster from the jump. But in later parts, especially in Part 6 flashbacks, in his lingering influence, we get a more layered look at the vampire. Despite his eternal youth, insane regeneration, body horror powers, and the ability to create zombies or even sire kids, kinda, all that has amplified whatever core personality Dio had before the mask took effect. And you have to wonder, why are other vampires we saw in earlier parts nothing more than mindless fodder or disposable minions? Couldn't there have been a much more nuanced and intelligent vampires like Dio? Instead we get stuff like this. The answer is in the narrative purpose again. Most vampires in JoJo are tools or extensions of someone stronger, usually Dio or the Pillarmen who created the masks. The transformation cranks up the base instincts, bloodlust and power hungry, but it doesn't automatically make you a genius schemer. Dio was already a calculating, ambitious psycho before the mask. The vampirism just gave him the tools to go God mode on people. The average chump who gets turned? Fodder, disposable, cannon meat for the heroes to punch through on the way to the real threat. There's a prominent narrative reason for why the demons and vampires are the way they are in the story, and I'll still maintain you can dislike them for any reason. Trope fatigue, moral qualms, you stepped on a Lego this morning, whatever fits your need. But you have to remember that these are fictional races built to serve the plot, the themes, and the hype fights. Just like Sparta was the first demon who came to humanity, or Frieren's demons show power without bonds is empty, Dio's the rare vampire who turns monstrosity into something terrifyingly intelligent. At the end of the day, these quote-unquote evil races, whether DMC's bloody demons, Frieren's predatory mana hoarders, or JoJo's vampiric fodder turned god mode threats like Dio, they aren't just lazy tropes when done right. They're powerful tools in the writer's box. They give the story clear stakes. There's the monster horde, the predator species, the disposable minions. Now watch the heroes punch through them with heart, bonds, tricks, or sheer Joestar bullshit. They create perfect mirrors that make the protagonist shine brighter, showing what humanity, or elfhood, or half-demon swagger, looks like when you embrace the messy, emotional, adaptive stuff of these superior or evil beings lacked. Sparta becomes legendary because he's the exception that proves the rule, his legacy falling onto his sons for better or worse. Frieren's journey hits harder because the demons are a what-if she never learned to care foil, and Dio stands out as a terrifying genius because most vampires are just cannon fodder for the real fights. A contrast fuels epic moments, and themes that stick with you long after the credits roll. It's not about saying, this race is evil forever and that's fine, it's about them using it to explore what makes us, or our heroes, worth rooting for. Yeah. Critique the trope all you want. Don't get me wrong, everyone has a reason to dislike a trope, and this one especially so. But when the story wields an evil race with purpose, it elevates the writing to another level to consider. It turns simple good versus evil into something deeper, more satisfying, and way more fun to watch explode on screen. These fictional races exist to serve the plot, the themes, and the absolute bangers of battle, and honestly, when they do their job well, that's peak fiction. When they do it bad, well, obviously it's going to be sucking, but you get the point. Circling back to where we started, evil races, species, whatever you want to call them, are a trope I'm still kind of on the fence about. Even though I did go to bat for them, I still want to call it a clean trope because much like any other tool for writing, it can be used properly or improperly. On one hand, yes, declaring an entire group inherently evil can be lazy, reductive, and kind of gross when it echoes real-world baggage. We've seen it scrubbed from games like D&D for a reason, and there's no shortage of stories that handle it clumsily or harmfully. And sometimes it's just punching down on cardboard monsters. But on the other hand, when a story uses them with purpose, and it stops being lazy and starts being essential, these evil groups clear the path for stakes, hype battles, and character growth. They let the heroes shine through heart, tricks, bonds, or sheer chaotic human bullshit, or Joestar bullshit. They force us to ask, what makes someone, or something, worth saving? What happens when power lacks empathy? Can environment, nature, or choice override destiny? And in a safe, fictional sandbox, we get to explore these questions without real consequences. Fiction doesn't have to mirror perfect morality. Sometimes it needs monsters to make the heroes matter. Sometimes it needs cannon fodder to have punches land harder. Sometimes it needs the rare exceptions like Sparta, Vivi, or Goku to prove that the rule isn't absolute. Because at the end of the day, whether you love them or hate them, or just roll your eyes at them, evil races aren't going anywhere because they're still a literary tool. They serve the plot, amplify themes, and deliver those absolute banger moments that make us cheer, cringe, or think twice. But hey, if you think the trope is lazy and harmful, that's fine. No skin off my nose. I just wanted to make a video talking about it because, hey, it's an interesting topic.
and your judgments interest me not.
And if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a comment, a like, and if you're on mobile, try using the hype feature. I hear it helps the channel out much more. I'm Manga Common, and I think I'm gonna go back to talking about individual people and games now, okay? Okay, later everyone! Hey, major thanks to my supporters on Patreon, Ko-Fi, and channel members. These amazing people like Bloody Eclipse, Red Jester, Emily Infinite, Raven Gutiana, Odd Emerald Zone, Atheon, Saki Eclipse, Miles Vega, Mike Soul, and Shadow Pain. Thanks again for supporting me. Your contributions help me and my editors continue to make amazing content for you all to enjoy. And if you want to see your name amongst these great people, check things out down below in the description to find out how. And hey, if you liked the video, be sure to leave a like, a comment, and if you're on mobile, use the hype feature to help push the video more into the algorithm. This stuff helps out well, and most of it is free. And if you reach this part of the video, YouTube thinks you'd like to see these videos, so be sure to check them out. Manga Common out.